So, Dr. Hess, you have written the commentary Song of Songs in the Baker Commentary on the Old Testament series. Could you share with us more about this fascinating book, authorship, dating, names, geographical references, and canonization and other stuff? So, please unpack this.
It's, it's a lot of information. Well, the book's only 117 verses, so it's not that long. It's one of the shorter books in the Bible, but yet it has a very important role, I think, in terms of its own value and significance. Uh, it's a wonderful book in many ways. Of course, it's a book I believe that is rooted in love poetry and love between a man and a woman in particular. In fact, I would argue that a big part of the reason for its presence in the Bible is to balance out what after Genesis 3 and the fall and the disharmony between man and woman comes to be so much of the Bible, both Old and New Testament, is concerned with the misuse of that relationship, romance, sexuality, all these things, and their abuse, and even to the point where in the prophets of the Old Testament, again and again becomes an image that's used to describe how Israel has betrayed God and gone away, and the people of God have turned against, like a broken marriage where the wife has betrayed the husband in that case. And so you have this picture, and then in the law and legal material, you have so many descriptions that are designed to warn against the misuse of sexuality, like in Leviticus 18 and elsewhere, incest and adultery and other things that are condemned. In the New Testament, Jesus warns against this sort of thing, and so does Paul again and again, the apostle, warning against the misuse of sexuality. And there he makes a connection between the church and Jesus Christ and likens it, the closeness of that relationship to that between a husband and wife or a wife and husband. So there is a lot of discussion of this, but it's almost always sort of negative, except in the Song of Songs. The Song of Songs celebrates it and rejoices in that relationship, the romantic relationship between a man and a woman. It uses what I would call metaphors or word pictures. It's probably the richest book in terms of any book in the Bible, for verse, word for word, using these word pictures to describe that relationship and really to rejoice in it. And I think you know it is a loving romantic relationship, and some have argued, well, clearly this is a relationship that is not concerned about marriage, and so you have sex outside of marriage and this sort of thing. But I don't really see that. In fact, in the very middle of the psalm, in the end of chapter 4 and into 5, about 4 or 5 times, I guess it is, the Hebrew word kala is used. Kala means uh, bride, and bride is an important term. The boy describing the girl describes her as his sister and his bride. And of course, like today, even in churches and so forth, we might call one another brothers and sisters to describe a closeness of a fellowship and relationship without being physical brothers and sisters or biological. But you would never call someone your bride. Uh, that's a legal term. And it was a legal term in the Old Testament as well. And so it doesn't make sense that they would use this term unless they were married or were virtually about to be married, and at that point. So I don't see this at all as simply casual sex or something like this. And I do believe, having examined the way in which the poems themselves, or poem of the Song of Songs, repeats and develops themes and ideas about love, and the daughters of Jerusalem, a kind of chorus in the background that are repeatedly appealed to, but other terms as well, to such an extent that I think this is a unified piece. It's not a collection of different poems that were put together at some point. So I see all of this, and the beauty of the psalm, you can hear the repetition of sound. The opening lines, Shir Hashirim Asher Lishlomo, the Song of Songs belonging to Solomon. And the Song of Songs, like Holy of Holies elsewhere, is in fact a reference to the superlative, the best song ever. The super song, as some people have used the term, which raises a question itself. Then, how is it that this is? It's wonderful just to speak of human love as the best song, but don't we have again and again in the book of Psalms, we have praises to God and God's relationship? Shouldn't Psalm 23, the Good Shepherd, or Psalm 100, which describes how good it is to praise God and sing and give thanks to Him, would these be better as the best song if you're going to describe it? But I really think here that what we have in the song is a description of romantic love as a kind of sign pointer. It's interesting that the word for love in Hebrew, ahav, he loves or she loves, ahava, or simply the noun love, ahava, in this book is never translated in the Greek Septuagint by terms like eros, erotic love, or even fellow, which means a companion, the love of a friend. But it's only ever translated by agape. That's the only word. Now, agape, if you know Greek words for love, is a very special word that's used in the New Testament. It can mean a variety of different loving relationships, but it is the word used by Paul and others to describe the love between God and His people, and the love between us and God, and that love which we are to have, and also for one another. In the great chapter on love in 1 Corinthians 13, which goes on to describe how great love is and how important it is, and the greatest of all is love, uses agape. So it's clearly a very special word. And I believe that the translators understood the song at this point. They understood it, and they saw that in the loving relationship that's described between the man and the woman that we have here, I think what you could describe as a sign, a pointer to that greater love which God has for His people, and which Christ has for His church. This takes me, therefore, a little bit away from what some people use the song and have used it in the past as a kind of allegory, where it's simply an allegory where the girl is the people of God, Israel, and the boy is God in Judaism. And in Christianity, the girl is the church and the boy is Jesus. And while this may seem good, it, to me, does not really fit the song. You have, for example, chapter 8, verse 5, the girl comes to the boy and wakes him up, or even arouses him, depending upon how you understand that verb. But the point is, the church never does that to Jesus. The church never wakes up Jesus. I mean, what, doesn't make any sense. And I think there are a number of examples like this where we're best not to simply take it as an allegory, but to see it for what it is. It is a rejoicing in a loving relationship, and then the principles and ideas of that love point towards a greater love, the love of God. And they show us that there is good in this, that it's not just all to be restricted and laws spoken about it and other things. But really, it is a wonderful, loving relationship. Then that raises, of course, the question, because this is a picture of that loving relationship between the boy and the girl in several sort of scenes or parts where oftentimes the two are apart and then come together, and they have that love for one another. But again and again, we see in this the setting. The setting is a setting of nature and the world around it, and indeed, if there is one thing that we can say about the time when it is depicted or portrayed, it's in the spring. It's in the spring when everything's coming to life, when the gardens are blossoming. You have lots of perfumes and oils described, aromatics. You have flowers and beautiful plants of different sorts. So it's springtime, but the question is, which springtime? Now, of course, Solomon appears as connected with it, and that, I think, is part of his background as a wisdom figure. And there are a number of references to Solomon in the text, but he never speaks directly. He's not actually involved in the text. So he's portrayed kind of as an ideal figure. And towards the end, in chapters 6 and 7 and 8, the girl is sometimes called the Shulamite. And Shulamite is a reference. There is a place in Israel, northern kingdom, called Shulam, and there are people from there who are called Shulamite. Abishag, who's the person who takes care of David in his old age in 2 Kings chapter 1, is from this place. So is that what it means? Well, I guess it's possible, but another way of looking at that is to see it as the feminine form of Solomon. Shlomo is Solomon, and Shulamite is the feminine form, I think. And so the girl sees the boy as her Solomon, and the boy sees the girl as that sort of feminine form of this sort of wisdom figure, and who is able to bring together and describe the joy of this loving relationship. The time, therefore, is really not clear. We have a number of references, like in chapter 5, I think it is, and is it verse, chapter 5 and verse 4, it speaks of Tirzah, the land of Tirzah. And there, of course, Tirzah was the capital of Israel, of the northern kingdom of Israel, for a number of decades after the division between the south and north in 931 BC, after Solomon died. Then the south divided, or the north divided and split off from the south. Tirzah was its capital for a number of decades until Omri, the father of Ahab, came along and then set up a new capital. He bought land and created Samaria as a capital. But Tirzah was always a sort of beautiful spot, and it continued to be a place that people lived in until around 600 BC. Then it was abandoned, and it was never resettled. So if it's talking about Tirzah as a town that's thriving and a beauty around it, it would really be set in the time of the monarchy, the time of the kings. That would be the best time for it. But we also find, and people have pointed out, that there are a number of linguistic aspects to the song that suggest it should be later than that. The use of the word which or who, except in that very first line that I quoted you, is always the short form she, which normally appears after the exile. And we have pardes for the garden is sometimes called pardes, which is a Persian or Persian term that's brought in. And then there are one or two terms that may be Greek related. So what can we say about this? Well, they aren't frequent. They aren't a lot of them. And so one term finding its way in doesn't necessarily prove a date, because after all, uh, even Greece and certainly Iran or Persia to the east, there was contact between these countries and Israel. So it is possible to understand this as coming in earlier as a word that was borrowed and brought in. We don't have the complete inventory of all Hebrew words that would include these and give us that information. However, the form and syntax does suggest that the poem as we have it probably dates after the return from the exile, maybe in the 6th or 5th centuries BC. Nevertheless, the origins of the sentiments and possibly various aspects of the poetry, I think, goes back earlier than that and may go back to the monarchy, which is in many ways the setting envisioned by the writer. So we have a picture here of it. The theme of it, of course, is this relationship of love, of marital love, of romantic love, of sexual love. The context of it is, I believe, those a boy and girl who are either married or about to be married. And I think that what we see is a rejoicing in that love. We have some wonderful expressions and terms used throughout. What we don't have, and this has surprised a lot of people, is we don't have a separate word for God. God as a term never appears in the song. And this is a bit surprising. That's true, by the way, also of the book of Esther. God doesn't appear. So then the question arises, well, what's going on here? There is, however, one place where God does appear, and that is in the last chapter at one of the more or less high points of the song, uh, towards the end, verses right around verses 5 and 6. Yeah, where we read, and I'll read my translation from my commentary, but you can look it up and set it and look at it for yourself. The girl speaks to the boy and says in verse 6, "Set me like a seal on your heart, like a seal on your arm." Now, that, by the way, that idea is is a wonderful idea. It it describes love, and the seal is
Yeah,
something that is used as a ring, and I think the arm here is the whole extension right to the hand and to the ring, and it's used, and everyone had a distinctive seal to mark a document with it. In later times in the monarchy, it had the name of the person on. In earlier times, it had a distinctive picture or design. Another way in which a seal was worn was around the neck on a string, sort of, and you would then use it. But either way, it was used to identify who you are. So when the girl says, "Set me like a seal on your heart, like a seal on your arm," the heart, of course, she wants to be as close to the boy as possible, and so that's an expression of love there. But also it's not a loss of identity, but the identity of the girl and the identity of the boy are brought together in a special relationship to one another. And then it goes on, "For as strong as love, as strong as death is love, as difficult as Sheol, the place of the dead, is jealousy. Its flames are flames of fire, a flame of the Lord." Now, that last term, a flame of the Lord, is the Hebrew is something like shalbatya, and it only appears here in the entire Bible. And at the end of that, as you heard me pronounce it, there's the Yah. And some people say this is a shortened form of the divine name of God, Yahweh. And so that's why here, in fact, in this one word, it's not that God is a separate word, but is incorporated into this word to describe the flames as flames of the Lord. And I think this is true. I think that that's what's going on here. It is a reference to that, and it's at the high point of the song by saying that these flames, this desire, all of this relationship actually comes as a gift from God. And it is designed to bring us together as God wishes, man and woman, boy and girl, who are mature. But it also points, as I say, to that from which who gives this as a gift. It is a gift given by God, and it points to the relationship of God to his people and his love for us and calling of us in terms of loving him.
Thank you so much, Professor Hess. Now, some people postulate that maybe it is referring to Egyptian princess of Solomon, because we have a description of her as Egyptian chariots, or even the term sister that's common for Egypt. We know that Abraham called Sarah sister when he goes in Egypt. So, what do you think? Is it referring to something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I let me first of all say that there has been some study done because Egyptian love poetry from the time of Solomon and earlier does exist, and it is probably the closest in terms of similarity with some of the sentiments and ideas that we have here. But it is still different, of course, and you have some different emphases. You have a different appreciation with love coming from God in this way. Uh, However, this interpretation of the of Solomon is and his love for the Egyptian pharaoh's daughter and ultimately Mary, or even something else, is, I think, pushing what the song actually says beyond what it suggests. It nowhere tries to identify uh, an Egyptian woman, or the daughter of the pharaoh, or anything else. There have been attempts to see this as a kind of drama or story. And in this story, usually what happens, the way it's explained, is the Solomon is a kind of conniving, scheming figure who wants to bring the girl into his harem as another conquest, as another addition. And the boy is a shepherd boy, sort of, a simple shepherd boy who just loves the girl for who she is. And so the issue is kind of going back and forth. Who is she going to join? In the end, she chooses the shepherd boy rather than Solomon, and so it's a happy a happy ending. This is a wonderful story, but is that really what the song is saying? And I don't think it is, because you don't have a plot or a theme going through like that. And it would be very strange that a song that is dedicated, or at least especially connected with Solomon, either as author or as the inspirer of the song, would then portray Solomon as a villain, as an evil person. It just doesn't quite make sense in terms of the way it's portrayed. And as I said, Solomon nowhere speaks in this. He has no active role in it. The only people who have active roles are the boy and the girl, and then in the background you have these daughters of Jerusalem who are appealed to several times. But other, no, nobody else is forefronted as having that role. Solomon is spoken about as having wealth, as having a wonderful palanquin or sort of thing that people carry and you sit in or lie in as you go from place to place. And that is pictured at one point, but that's as close as we get. So I don't really see that Egyptian connection there. In fact, while you have spices and references to other lands, Egypt isn't referred to much at all, at all. In fact, the lands around it are referred to. Heshbon and Moab are spoken of. Also, north of Israel is spoken of up to Mount Hermon, and the areas north there are spoken of. And the aromatics and the frankincense and myrrh that we, of course, appear again at the birth of Jesus, but also nard, which is a very valuable perfume, actually comes from the Himalayas. And a number of these other fragrances come from the Horn of Africa, which is not Egypt, but what would be today Somalia and Djibouti, and possibly across the strait there into southwestern Saudi Arabia, the southwestern Arabian Peninsula, what is today Yemen, and what was, in fact, where the Queen of Sheba came from, and no doubt brought spice trade with her. Um, uh, so there's a number of countries and places mentioned or alluded to, but Egypt is not one of them.
Yes, so we have Lebanon, Engedi, Jerusalem, even Hermon, and other
Yeah,
cities. I
yeah,
think Sanir,
yeah, that's right.
Carmel, Beistan. Yeah. So, what do those places tell us? What do you think? Because there are many mentioned.
Yeah, I think here the song and the poets and the girl and boy as they describe these things, it reaches out in their imagination as they use these what for them are distant places, but beautiful places. Lebanon, of course, is famous for its snow-capped mountains. And so it becomes a beautiful area of that. In fact, that's the name Lebanon means white and refers to the white snow on the mountains. Places like Bashan refer to that area across from the sort of east of the Jordan River and the Sea of Galilee, what today could be a part of the Golan Heights. And again, a wonderful area in terms of water and streams and a beautiful region. Heshbon, it talks about the pools of Heshbon, which provide water and are in that sense life-giving. In fact, water is a big theme because water gives life, and so it's part of that expression of love and the joy of love, of life-giving love that God does give. And of course, Jerusalem is important because if it isn't Solomon, it certainly is set in the context of this of the area of Jerusalem, of the fields and gardens and other things which were so precious, so much so that in the Gihon Spring, even if you go today and walk down the east side of the city of David, you'll see little channels or places which were originally made at some point. They no longer work this way, but they were made for water to come out and water what would have been a garden area there, possibly used for beautiful plants, but also for vegetables and other things that could have been consumed by the people of Jerusalem. So yeah, this is all of these areas like Tirzah, which of course is also beautiful. I remember the first time visiting Tirzah, and the flowers were all in bloom at the time, and it was just a very beautiful landscape.
Thank you so much, Professor Hess. And how author can even talk about love? He's polygamist because we have in 6:8 60 queens, 80 concubines, and without a number maidens. So, how you comment
Yeah.
this?
Yes, I know. Well, of course, this is not ideal in terms of Solomon. Solomon's life versus that of the people, of the boy and girl, because for them, what is clear in this song, if nothing else is clear, is that really they only have eyes for one another. The boy focuses on the girl, and four times he describes what later on becomes known in Arabic culture and language as a wasif. That is a poem which describes the physical features of the girl. And once the girl describes the physical features of the boy too, so she reciprocates in this. So it's very interesting that their focus is really on one another and not on a third party, much less on concubines and wives. So while this may describe wealth or it may describe political power, because some of these marriages, maybe most of them, were designed to bring connections, political connections between different countries. And so a king would marry princesses of these countries, and that would bring a connection that was political, but also then relational as well between the countries. But yeah, I think that is, if anything, a contrast with what we find in the actual song itself, where we see that relationship between the boy and the girl.
Yes, I appreciate your answer. And some people say that there is no mention of God in the entire book. You explained that there is a indication that there is a mentioning Yahweh, but also Richard Davidson said that in 2:7, let's say, we have a verse that mention gazelle, and that is Sebaot, like something like
Yes.
Savaot or something like that, and also Sadai, like El Shaddai. So
Did
is
I?
it
Yeah, 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 yeah.
wordplay?
Goats and things. Yeah. For sure, these are similar sounding terms, but that's not the same thing as saying that they actually are describing God. Um, that 1 and 2:7 is part of that address, I think, to the daughters of Jerusalem. I adjure you by the gazelles and so forth. And maybe it does harken back to a connection in the past with God, but you can't you if we could do that, we could prove God everywhere because you just how close you want to make it. So I rather see this as simply a way of really calling upon different beautiful pictures and images in nature and in the world around as a means by which you invoke or call upon them to promise this rather than using God in an oath, which the Bible tends to not encourage you to do. And that seems to be what is being requested here. So if it originally hearken to God, it doesn't at this point, I don't think. It's if anything a way to avoid that.
Yes, thanks. And last, I want to ask you about this book. Is last chapters we have some weird events. The girl is beaten by guardians.
Oh,
There is a little sister, also vineyard, and many things. So, can you explain the end of the book?
well, the being beaten is around chapter 5, I believe, and that's a
Yes,
well-known
earlier.
passage where, and it's kind of in the center, like I mentioned, with the use of the term bride. I think it's intentional because it's an emphasis because that's part of a picture where the boy comes to her and they seem to live in separate places, which I think is important. It's one of the reasons why I think this is talking about an engagement or something leading up to a marriage and the commitments that are being made. But he comes to her door and she says, you know, here I am in bed, I'm ready for to sleep, and must I get up? and he reaches his hand through the latch, and then he pulls it away. And as she gets up to open the door for him, he's gone. And then she goes out in search of him. And the watchmen who are designed to guard the city don't like this because it's part of their responsibility to keep things quiet and not to have a lot going on. So she says they catch her and they beat her. And we don't know entirely what this is a picture of, other than she may have done this once before or twice, and she may have been warned, and this may have been some kind of a punishment. In any case, the point of it in the story is she doesn't actually find the boy at that time and waits until another time. So the next part of the poem picks up with a different picture, but she's calling on the daughters of Jerusalem and others to praise and to look for the boy and see if they can find him, because at that point he seems to be gone. The little sister is, I think, what it suggests. It suggests that is at the end. I think that's in chapter 8, and it's in a different context. And the context there, I believe, is a context which resets, as it's talking about this love and the passion and the joy of it. It also then sets it into what is a kind of, in fact, the brothers are speaking there, into a kind of family context where there is an interest in, I mentioned this verse already in the context of how can the church wake up Jesus Christ? Well, they can't, but the girl wakes up the boy in chapter 8, verse 5. Beneath the apple is second half of the verse. Beneath the apple tree I awoke you. There your mother conceived you. Now, this is a place of love, but it's also connected with the family. And they're aware of family and of family relationships. And so the brothers then are the ones, in fact, the brothers were there in the first chapter as taking the girl and forcing her out to work the fields. And so she became tanned or darkened by the sun. And that was a cause of some embarrassment for her, because that kind of tan was not desirable, unlike in some places it is today. The idea of having a tan wasn't so great. And you can read about that in chapter 1. But in chapter 8, the brothers say, we have a younger sister who has no breasts. What will we do for our sister on the day when she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build a silver battlement on her. If she is a door, we will surround her with a cedar panel. And then the girl says, I am a wall, and my breasts are like towers. She goes on to talk about her physical attributes and how that looks. But I think what's happening here is the brothers are almost coming into the scene now and talking about their other sister, who is a younger sister, who is not yet physically mature. And will she have a husband? Will she marry, as was the custom and desired at that time? And then they say, well, we will protect her, and we will guarantee her honor so that she can enter into a marriage, I believe, much like what the girl and boy here are looking forward to, who are the main actors in the song. So that's kind of how I tend to understand that passage. But you're right, there are various. This is not a set of this is not a philosophical book with a set of syllogisms or something else that goes in a certain logical order and then comes out at the end with a conclusion. This is open-ended. It's what love poetry does as it moves from one theme to another and then comes back and revisits these themes. It's much more like that than it is a plot or drama.